press against me and be broken!
Just when I thought that X-Men 97 couldn't possibly get any better after the first 3 episodes of Season 2, here comes the 4th, titled Rise of Apocalypse Part 2. Now this was an episode that really took me by surprise because I couldn't predict such unexpected twists and a major character death. It was 30 minutes of eventful drama and action, and by the end of it all, the X-Men don't have it any easier than they did before because the threat still looms large in the form of the mighty apocalypse. I love how the narrative manages to cover so much story in so little time, but this also means that some of you might have missed out on some major details and interesting Easter eggs. So in this video, I will try to cover all the major pointers from the episode, big or small, and there will be some major spoilers along the way. You have been warned.
I could only save us few.
Sabanur survives Rama-Tut's attack. I mean, this wasn't really much of a surprise because we all know that Sabanur wouldn't be taken out by that attack. The previous episode ended with a devastating attack from Rama-Tut, and this episode opens with the consequences. As it turns out, his mentor Baal is dead, and this tragedy pushes Sabanur to embrace a more animalistic version of himself. But more on that later, because the immediate aftermath also shows the X-Men and Magneto, who have survived the attack courtesy of an energy shield created by Magneto. Noor gives the X-Men another chance. If you remember the events of the last episode, you will know how furious Sabanur was after finding out that Magneto and Xavier have been lying to him. After the death of Baal, he is seething with rage, and it takes some special courage from Professor Xavier to step in and attempt to calm him down. He begs for an opportunity to explain, and even though I half expected Noor to launch a massive attack, he actually gives him the chance. He is impressed by the power that he possesses in order to survive the Pharaoh's attack, and going by his survival of the fittest philosophy, Noor believes that such strength warrants a chance to explain, even though he warns against no more lies. Bishop remains the only sensible voice of reason. Yes, I know, saying this knowing fully well that Sabanur cannot really be changed and the fate of the universe cannot be altered like this, but it almost seems like the X-Men stuck in the ancient Egypt timeline don't have a clue about how time travel works. How can they expect to change so much without impacting the timeline majorly? What if they cease to exist or some other catastrophe replaces Apocalypse, even if they manage to prevent Sabanur from becoming the dreaded villain? Nevertheless, Bishop is the only sane voice among them for the longest time in this episode. He keeps asking them to leave and go back to the original 90s timeline, and the scene where they discuss it with Nightcrawler, Rogue, and Magneto is an interesting one. Nightcrawler agrees with the idea of Bishop, but Rogue is hoping against hope for a miracle, and I understand that this has something to do with the death of Gambit, which he hopes to alter by changing Sabanur. But like I said before, that is really not how time travel works, and to be fair, Bishop is the only one with any real time traveling experience. Even Magneto doesn't want to return just yet, and in order to make sure that the others don't, he destroys the time band. Now they must find a cosmic temple with otherworldly power to ensure a return. Sabanur is already an extremist cynic. When I think of it now, the writing was always on the wall, and Sabanur was never meant to be reformed. Even after he considers hearing out Xavier, his words reek of cynicism and an extremist mindset that doesn't bode well for any kind of reformation. He believes that now that his people have been eliminated, there is nothing for him to protect the place or fashion a change that will make him a better individual, and you don't just change someone so rigid. He simply doesn't believe in the promise of a better world. The Sabanur origin story is done very nicely. There is so much to appreciate about the quality of storytelling in X-Men 97 that I often forget how efficiently the makers fit in vast storylines into tiny clips. One great example of this is the origin story of Sabanur, which is wrapped up within a minute. It takes place when Noor allows his mind to be probed by Xavier, who gets a look into his past. We see baby Noor abandoned by his mom, and then his rise as a slave, through the struggles and hardships that shaped him into who he is. However, before Xavier can learn further, he is interrupted by the cosmic voice calling out to him. They decide to find a temple together, and this is probably the last time that you will see the X-Men working alongside Noor, because everything changes after this event. the significance of Rogue and Noor's brief interaction. I was surprised by the amount of hope promised in the first half of the episode, especially with a majority of the X-Men believing that Noor can be changed and prevented from turning into the dreaded apocalypse. A part of this hope can be seen during the interaction between Rogue and Noor as they all catch a break from the night before reaching the temple, and neither of them get any sleep. Noor asks her what is waiting for her in her timeline, and she talks about her loss. I find it very significant because of the possibility that Gambit will come back as a horseman of apocalypse in the upcoming episodes. Also, it is a nice touch when Rogue asks Noor about ever finding love, and he coldly states that love is weakness for him. Now try changing this man. Xavier's dream interaction with Kang. Well, this has gotta be one of the major giveaways of the episode, and any hope that one might have about Noor changing his ways should disappear with what Kang has to say. He reaches out to Xavier psychically when the latter is asleep, and what he says is rather insightful. Of course, he knows all about Xavier as he calls him the patron saint of peace and the founder of the X-Men. Meanwhile, he introduces himself by saying that he has so many names: Nathaniel, Victor, Kang, and he reveals that this place blurs identities and timelines. Clearly, he is someone capable of time travel, and Xavier wonders what he is up to in Sabanor's time, attempting to enslave his people. Kang tells him that if he is able to acquire the celestial power inside that temple, it would ensure his victory, and when Xavier refuses to betray his dear friend Magnus because he believes that Noor can be changed, comes the prophecy from Kang. He gives a grim reminder of how they cannot stop him, and he will never stop him, which tells you how the upcoming episodes will be like. The writing is on fire. I have to interrupt the chain of the narrative here because I have to spare a special word of appreciation for the writing in this episode. I mean, it is generally good in X-Men 97, but this episode has some of the best dialogues that you will ever see in the series. The war of words, the emotional dialogue delivered, and some killer lines will ensure that you have a few jaw-dropping moments along the way and a few crucial quotes for your next Instagram post. Deja Vu Moment offers a major revelation. I knew that things would go haywire once they enter the temple, and it starts off in a rather eerie and unexpected manner. Firstly, Beast detects the presence of gamma particles and discovers that the rock has melted over 10 millennia ago. Then Sabanur announces that it all happened when a god fell from the skies, and that is just about enough hint to know where they are. If not, then the next stage lays it out in simpler terms. After they separate into two groups, Bishop and Xavier are left with Noor as they explore the temple, while Magneto, Rogue, Beast, and Nightcrawler look elsewhere. Rogue remarks how it is almost like a deja vu moment for her inside this temple, and Beast picks up massive energy trails somewhere. Then, Beast realizes that they've been here before in their own timeline. This just happens to be the mighty spacecraft ship designed by cosmic creatures across the stars. What makes it worse is that in their time, this ship is a weapon for apocalypse. Misguiding Noor doesn't stop the inevitable. You have to give credit for the effort undertaken by Magneto and Xavier in trying to convince Sabanur that there is a better world for mutants in the future. Of course, it is a lie, but it is a white lie aimed at curbing the terrifying villain that he is supposed to become. But the deception trick doesn't work for long after they enter the temple. As Noor, Xavier, and Bishop walk further into the ship, it almost seems like Noor knows his way around it, and he admits that he feels like he is drawn by a greater force. What follows next is the inevitable that I was waiting for. Noor sees hieroglyphics images on the walls of the ship depicting him as a superior being along with images of the X-Men below him. A voice calls out to him saying, "Come be eternal," and this is enough for Xavier to send a psychic message to Magneto because he knows that things are about to get messy. Noor sees his future and he is back to his furious self again. He thinks that the X-Men knew about what he is supposed to become, and they attempted to stop him, and Xavier tries to explain that they only want to stop the monster that he is about to become. Of course, Noor will have none of it, and he shows his insane powers when Bishop tries to shoot him. He merely knocks Bishop out of the way and strangles Xavier while walking toward his true calling. the iconic transformation into Apocalypse. The other X-Men have come by now, but they are just not powerful enough to counter Sabanur. He single-handedly takes them all down, including Magneto, and walks toward the source of all the cosmic power. There is a blinding light, and then the voice of the cosmic being rings out loud. Then begins the transformation as Nur changes into Apocalypse. And boy, this is absolutely peak animation. The detailing is crazy, and I love how the transformed avatar stands even more terrifying than his earlier form. The Celestials reference. I cannot stress enough on the significance of the Celestials here. For starters, the ship was built by a Celestial who believes that evolution can only be brought about by destruction. You can imagine why Apocalypse loves this theory. Sabanur is all about evolution, survival of the fittest, and power, and the Celestial offers him all of that if he chooses to embrace his destiny, which of course he does. The Celestial also says that Apocalypse can be an eternal, and this is quite something if you consider the importance of this moment where Sabanur gives in to his urge for more power and dominance. Nur never considers that the X-Men might be right. He might be powerful as hell, but Sabanur is not the smartest fellow, at least not yet. I mean, after finding out about his future, he never considers this for once, that the X-Men might actually be saving him from a cursed existence. The first and only idea that comes to him is that the X-Men are trying to rob him of his glorious destiny, and this goes on to show that there was never really a chance to transform him because he was too far gone. He only needed the right circumstances and catalyst to transform into the mighty Apocalypse, and this would have happened with or without the intervention of the X-Men. Magneto's heroic twist. Even after realizing that Apocalypse cannot be stopped by now, the X-Men think about staying back for one last effort. However, Magneto is now firmly in his senses, and he helps Bishop by forcing the time bands on everyone and sending them back to the present timeline in the 90s. But he intends to stay back to make an attempt to stop him. While the others are moved through the timeline, Xavier tries to hold on like the true friend that he is, and one of Apocalypse's powerful energy blasts knocks them both out. Now, who is the god and who is the insect, he says, as he prepares the ship to launch a devastating attack on Rama-Tut city that would destroy everyone there. The ship follows his orders, and once again, the animation quality stands out for me. Magneto tries to stop him with his powers, and it is so cool to see Apocalypse furious as he tries to repel the attack. But Magneto and Xavier have no control over the ship, which is all set to attack and destroy the city of Pharaoh Rama-Tut. So, what is the deal with Pharaoh Rama-Tut? He does come across as a pretty mysterious figure so far, doesn't he? Rama-Tut has come to this timeline to take control of Sabanur and his people, but more importantly, he wants to access the powerful celestial technology. Even his interaction with Xavier is shrouded in mystery, but at least he reveals his other identities. Nathaniel is basically Nathaniel Richards, a descendant of Mr. Fantastic. Don't confuse this with Reed Richards' father, because this Nathaniel Richards is his descendant many generations later. Victor and Kang are the other aliases, and you know how big a villain he is in the context of the wider Marvel universe. I wonder if this also hints at the possibility of Nate Gray, the alternate universe of Cable from the Age of Apocalypse, to show up in the future episodes. Maybe there is even a possibility of the Fantastic Four making a cameo appearance. Kang leaves just in time. A key to survival in knowing when to leave at the right time, well, as it turns out, Kang is not some egotistic maniac who stays back to challenge Apocalypse even after he gains control of the cosmic ship. He is quick to leave because his purpose in this timeline has been served. Before leaving, he tells his female minion that she is an external, and maybe that's why she looked so familiar all along. For those who don't know, the externals are 10 immortal mutants who are linked, and I'm curious to find out what is the deal with this woman. The death of a hero, rise of a new threat. Magneto doesn't quite give up, even though attempting to stop the ship from destroying the city with his magnetism powers would mean certain death. There are some heartwarming scenes as the two friends accept their faith, and Magneto wants Xavier to continue with his purpose of a better world. The next bit is another cinematic spectacle as Magneto gives his everything to stop the attack from being as devastating as it was intended. However, his efforts leave him extremely weakened and injured. In a climatic twist, As Xavier is about to crawl to his friend on the sand, Apocalypse appears. He lands the killing blow. As a helpless Xavier looks on, Magneto is killed, and for the first time, I see real anger in Xavier's eyes as he curses Apocalypse. But the truth is that he is defeated in his timeline, and Bishop emerges just in time to take him back to the present. Are we getting at an Onslaught story arc? This is one of my biggest picks from this episode, even though it doesn't quite add up. If you explore the depths of the story, you will find a couple of key comic book storylines, such as the Age of Apocalypse, but the narrative has changed considerably for the show. For instance, in the Age of Apocalypse story arc, Magneto is the one who kills Apocalypse and not the other way around. So given such changes, I cannot rule out the possibility of Onslaught being introduced in some form, but let me explain. Onslaught is basically a terrifying psionic entity born from the fractured psyche of Charles Xavier and Magneto. It is a combination of the darkest parts of Magneto's psyche mixed with Xavier's suppressed frustrations, and I think I have seen glimpses of that toward the end of the episode when Xavier tried to verbally hurt Apocalypse for killing his friend Magnus. He doesn't hold back and says some very un-Xavier things, like his mom did a great thing by abandoning him and that he should have been left to bake in the desert sun. Well, not that it affects Apocalypse, but I still got the feeling that something might have changed with Xavier, and we might see the Onslaught saga unfold in some form, if not directly. Everyone is back in the 90s. Well, not everyone, I guess, because Magneto is clearly gone now, but the other X-Men and Professor Xavier are all back to the original timeline, which is the 90s. They have failed to stop Sabanur in the past, and now they must find a way to deal with Apocalypse and his threat in the present timeline. There will be some great challenges coming up, but the one I'm anticipating the most is the comeback of Gambit in a lethal Horseman of Death avatar. Also, what if Apocalypse resurrects Magneto as one of his horsemen? I know this is stretching things a bit too far, but just imagine the plight of Rogue if that happens. The show has been raising the bar so high that with 5 more episodes to go this season, I get the feeling that it will be one of the best X-Men seasons ever. There is so much story left to be covered and so many loose ends, and I am very curious to see where they end the season with the next one already confirmed and in line. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this eventful episode, and also share your thoughts on the dramatic, climatic twist and the implications of Magneto's death. If you appreciate the efforts to bring you with this content, then please, by all means, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more X-Men 97 content. This has been Devi of Marvelous Videos. I'll be seeing you on the next one.